Okay, why don't we all join together in the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America.
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Trying to get this. Just bear with me one sec. Hey, Ginny, can I share? Okay, well, let me put my screen up. I hope I can do this. I've not done this before. Let me go to my. Let me hit share screen and let's see if that'll work. Here we go. What can you guys see? Can you see that?
Not the whole thing,
Just a red line.
just like the toolbar, the PowerPoint. There we go.
There you go.
Yeah, just got a little bit of a delay. Okay, so I thought we'd start with the presentation from the town to the board, from the Board of Selectmen to the Board of Finance.
Hold on, Steve. We should ask for public comment first, probably. It's on the agenda.
Sure, good point. Go ahead. Anybody have public comment?
Actually, Steve, yes, this is Harry. Yes, I do. Harry Shaker, 87 Long Meadow Hill Road. This is as a resident and a selectman. I don't often get to talk with the members of the Board of Finance, and I did make a statement last night, and it has to do with our financial office. This is now my 18th year dealing with school budget, or excuse me, town budgets, 14 with the schools and 4 with the selectmen. And I can't think of a year that I have been more confident in our finance department from top to bottom. And I just want to say how much I appreciate and respect Marcia and the work she brings, her work ethic and her experience and her knowledge that she brings to that office every day. Not being a big finance person, it's very comforting to be able to talk to Marcia. It doesn't matter what level you are, whether you're a high finance person, somebody who knows some, or just somebody who really doesn't have a lot of experience. She talks at your level and makes it very easy to understand. And we're just very privileged as a town to have Marcia and that office top to bottom. And I just wanted to make that statement to the Board of Finance, just to let them know how I feel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I agree with you 100%. Marcia's a great asset to the town. Her team, we put together a really good team and hired really good people. And you can see it in what comes out of the finance office, how questions are answered, and the level of detail that is there. So thank you
very much, Harry.
Okay, any other public comments, anybody? Okay, so I think we'll start with the Board of Selectmen presentation to the Board of Finance. Our overriding goal in putting together this year's budget is the 10-year model that we developed in 2019, primarily with a focus on the new school and how we could afford a new school, what it would look like over the next 10 years from a budget standpoint, how much it would cost, how much we'd have to pay in debt service, and all of the things that we needed. And we put together, you guys have seen it and got a copy of it, and we're updating it again this year. All of those variables, whether it's salaries, electricity, capital projects, what can we do and when can we do it and still remain with reasonable budgets going forward. So that project was to allow the debt service for the new school. And we've had an ongoing commitment to improving our ability to execute on capital projects in the town, particularly with those projects that are paid for with cash. Our goal is at some point to be paying for almost everything with cash, unless it's a huge project, say 300,000 and over. that it makes more sense to borrow for. We've had success in that. We've moved forward on that. We're going to continue to do that. So we want to continue to follow the model. We got to meet the needs of everybody in town and the ability to give our employees those tools that they need to serve the residents. And critically, we want to maintain our AAA rating. As you know, last year we were able to borrow the first tranche for the school, about $35 million. Our plan called for paying between 4% and 6% for the borrowing. Over 30 years was the plan. We were able to borrow for 20 years at 1.55%, which over the life of 20 years versus 30 years, we calculated we'll save over $21 million for the town. So we're getting there. We're not 100% on the cash or capital. Obviously, we're going to have to grow that as we move forward. You know, we keep on moving the paving up every year. We're getting real close to that. We started our budgets process in December, where we asked each of the department heads to put together a budget with a 0% increase in their operating budget. And many of them were able to do that. If they needed to do something extraordinary or different or needed additional assistance, we asked them to fill out what we call a next priority form, which is in addition to the budget coming to the first selectman and the board of selectmen. And it's a request for additional resources. A few departments did that, and we can go through that when we go through the budget. We met with every single department, discussed their budget, discussed what issues they had, concerns they had. And I think we put together a pretty good budget. All the departments were able to get us their budgets for the January 10th deadline. As I probably jump ahead here a little bit, but we went through all the process that we normally every year, scrutinize the revenues. What do we think are going to be revenues for land use for the town clerk? Are they going to go up? Are they going to go down? Are there any outliers in there? Is there a huge building project that's coming up that we know we're going to get X amount of dollars in building fees? And we went through that entire process. And then the Board of Selectmen met numerous times with both our departments and on Friday and yesterday to finish up and complete the budget. We finished the budget last night around 5:40, I believe. I did send out the budget last night, but when I converted it to PDF, it did not convert the entire budget to PDF. We corrected that today and sent it out to you. At this point in time, I know there's been some concern today. We had a resident 2 years ago ask us to give them our budget in Excel format. We declined to do that. My policy has been I don't want to give out executable documents to residents or to anyone who's not a board member and has a direct need for it. The resident took us to the Freedom of Information Commission, and last week they ruled against us. They ruled that an Excel spreadsheet is a record. My opinion is still that an Excel spreadsheet is a system that creates records, meaning the budget, and that no one needs, and I think there's too much opportunity for budgets to be futzed with and played with, and with social media do all that's just my opinion. We did last week send that on request, send that person a copy of the first selectman's budget in Excel format. We had no choice. The FOI commission ruled against us, and anyone else who asks for it will also be sent it. We're trying to make sure that we keep our budget safe and secure, but that makes it a lot more difficult. So the Board of Selectmen met with all the departments. We went through with all of them, their changes or updates. If they had next priority forms, we looked at that very carefully, and we finished our budget last night around 5:30. If we look at the overall budget versus the 10-year plan, I think we're in pretty good shape. The town operations right now are 1.72% under that 10-year plan. The education operations are 10.1% under. The capital spending is 15% under the plan, and debt service is just over the plan at 0.68%. The capital, I should note, is a little different because of the pandemic year and the borrowing and what we could do and what we couldn't do. So all the projects last year, we were unable to bond for them. So that would throw this off a little bit this year. But we did model it, figuring the amount for 21 of 3.2 million and 22 of 2.3 million. And, you know, in our efforts to make sure that we do the things that we need to do to keep the town running. In the town operations, in our new initiatives, we anticipated the staffing and financial legal effects of revaluation. That is happening right now and will go through next January to February time period. And people's houses and all the properties in town will be revalued as of next July 1st. So we'll have that for next year's budget. There has been some significant investment in town. So while the price of houses and properties has gone up, so we fully expect, as normally happens during a reval year, is that the mill rate will go down, but the taxes will relatively remain the same. I know the mill rate confuses people when it goes up and down because they think that's a fixed static measure, and it's not. It's relative to the revaluation every 5 years. If you have $1 million property and it goes to, in 5 years, it goes to $2 million, and let's say that's the only property in town, and the mill rate is 30, when the revaluation goes through, the mill rate on that same $2 million, on that same house that's now worth $2 million goes to 15. And it's the same amount of money collected. The mill rate just changes because the property values have changed. We've staffed the finance office a little stronger. We've had 2 interns in to help us with that. We're continuing to work very hard to keep the budget for the finance office intact, but we have a lot more demands on the finance office than we've had in past years. And we're going to be talking about that when we get to the next priority forms, because we're going to be looking for some additional help. We're investing in technology and more efficient software. We have moved 2 systems to the cloud. One of those was the tax assessor system. And that primarily occurred because the company that we use no longer will support your in-house servers. They're moving everything to the cloud. So if we stayed on the servers, we would not get the patches, we would not get the security updates. So we moved to the cloud. That's worked pretty well. We did have a little glitch because this happened over the last 3 months. When we hit the grand list, our tax assessor was able to very quickly understand that some things were not exactly correct, and she corrected those. So it added a little bit to our grand list, which is good. Another big issue that's coming up is the Candlewood Lake Authority's capital reserve. They're asking for a significant increase in this year's contribution to the Candlewood Lake Authority. That is primarily driven by their need to, and we talked this before about getting new boats. They wanted 2 new boats this year. They are getting 1 because First Light gave them $100,000 and they had some reserves. My opinion is what they should have been doing is asking towns for reserves for boats in the future. We know that they last somewhere between 10 and 15 years on average, and we're going to have to replace them just like we do fire trucks or any of our other vehicles. The Candlewood Lake Authority was not asking for any money for those capital purchases over the last at least 5 years that I've been the first selectman. So they're playing a little bit of catch up, and that is the largest portion of their increase that they're asking for, along with an increase in the salaries they're paying their Marine Patrol. The Marine Patrol they have is being paid significantly less than other Marine Patrols, including Lake Winona, which can make it hard to hire people and keep them. We've had to add a little bit of spending to the police account, to the police budget, to accommodate the Police Accountability Act. That's primarily in the form of body cameras. They are now required of every police department in Connecticut. Most police departments, I believe, have 3 years to do that. We had already started this, if you remember, we started talking about this a few years ago. We were able to buy the body cams out of the outside services fund, but the ongoing maintenance of the software will be about $25,000 per year.
Are we eligible for any of the grants in that?
Yes, there is a grant supposedly coming from the state for body cams. We haven't seen it yet, but we would be eligible for it. When that comes out, when they finally decide the budget and fund it, we should be able to apply for that.
The rules came out for that actually just yesterday. So the police are working on that.
Oh, great. So you're a little ahead of me on that one. We've more adequately funded public works or storms. Our experience has been over the last 3 years that these storms are getting more frequent and in many cases more difficult. The ECAS, however you pronounce that name. The storm we had 2.5 years ago really showed that two things. One, that our staff and public works crews and fire and police do an incredible job in protecting our town, but that we have to continue to make sure that we're ready for any event. Our social services, as you can imagine, in the pandemic has been hard pressed to meet the needs of our residents. We have been helping people. The amount of people that are applying for assistance and aid has gone up, I believe, about 40% year over year. We're able to meet that. The town was able to develop a fund we call Brookfield Recovers. People in town have been incredibly generous in donating to that fund, and that's allowed us to help people with food, stay in their apartments, pay a utility bill. We're not going to advertise that anymore, and we're going to let it wind down. We do have other funds in the town, and we think we have enough money in that fund to see us through this pandemic. We did, in a new priority list, the library asked for new additional books. One of the things they said to us, to the Board of Selectmen, that struck me as very, very odd is that 60% of the books that they have that are nonfiction, right, are over 40 years old. Having 40-year-old plus nonfiction books is not an ideal situation. That's history, that's current events, that's a lot of things. So they had asked for $10,000 about to purchase additional books that can be accessed via your computer, via your phone, via your Kindle. And we thought that was a very good and worthwhile thing to do. And the Board of Selectmen did approve that. And the last thing is the grounds crew. We have been hiring over the last 2 years a seasonal worker who works for about 5 to 6 months a year through the summer. And what we're asking and what Parks and Rec asks us, and we're asking the Board of Finance to do, is to fund a full position, and we would eliminate the cost of that seasonal position. That gives us a full-time worker year-round for doing all the things that we do. There is additional work that they're doing. They're taking care of the town center now. They're taking care of the Still River Greenway. And once we get to that, we can talk through the numbers and see if you think that makes sense. The school budget, the increase from last year, they originally asked for a 4.07% increase, made up of inflation and contractual increases, impact of decreased revenue, and strategic investments. We got updated from the time that the Board of Selectmen budget was, the first Selectmen budget was created. We got new estimates on what our costs for health insurance would be, and both the town and the schools were able to lower our requests for that. The schools are down $355,090, which is 0.79%. It's almost 0.8%. And the Board of Selectmen did make an adjustment to the school budget of $140,000. There will be some grants coming in that could possibly be used to offset some of the programs that they're doing. And that 140,000 represents 0.3% of their budget. The final Board of Selectmen proposed budget to the Board of Finance for the Board of Ed comes out to a 2.98% increase. When we talk about debt, I'm going to ask Marcia to talk a little bit about this because she has a very deep grasp of this. But as you can see from this debt service projection, and this is from our model, where we're going to end up, and we have a couple years here that are going to be difficult. Marcia, you want to give a quick overview on this?
You bet. That the model predicted that we're going to have a bump for a few years where we're going to have to try to figure out how to get through that. And so the blue is the principal that we have currently. The dark blue, I can't quite read that, I think is the interest that we have currently. And the green, dark green and light green are the principal and interest of what we have already committed to. The school, we still have about $38 million. And then we have some other projects for streetscape that we have called authorized but unissued debt. So what we're trying to do is assume that we issued bonds for those. It doesn't include any debt from this year. That and what would it look like on our payments? And you can see that we have 3 years where we have an issue. That it jumps up, and it's already jumped up some. It's just in this year's budget, it's just disguised because we have that premium. So we just we're trying to figure out how to get through those 3 years. And so one is to preserve fund balance. And so for that reason, the selectmen chose to not include all the premium income in next year's budget, that they would only include what they had to. The difference is about 200,000. That we have other options. We could cut some cash payments for capital in those years. We could monitor the taxes from new developments if they come in, or if there's potentially a large increase with one of our taxpayers. We could look at fund balance. For example, the federal government is working this week and potentially passing, maybe they did today and I'm just not up on it, passing a budget that we might be able to reimburse ourselves for our COVID contingency. What if we did the same thing this year that we did last year? Any underspending from $500,000 COVID contingency and maybe 250,000 left in that other contingency, move it over into our capital fund. Don't take it out next year as income, but take it out the year after. So we knew we would have this bump, and we're working on, creative solutions so that the taxpayers don't feel it. But that's what this is for. And the assumptions in the graph do include 30 years at 2%. We had originally thought we were bonding for 30 years, but because the interest rates were so low, we could drop 10 years off the back end for just a little bit more every year. That's what we did with the first tranche of money.
Thank you, Marcia. So as we move on, on our capital projects, our overall goal is to work to be paying cash for virtually every capital project that is not a huge amount. And our goal is to get up to $5 million a year in cash for capital. That's what we estimate the cost will be to maintain the capital assets of the town and not let them run down. The current year, we're increasing the current cash spending this year to $2,305,000 from the 1,458,000 in the current fiscal year by applying all new taxes from development and restoring 1/2 of the cut we made to that spending last year in the COVID. The current year, we're decreasing bonding, other debt for capital projects under $50,000. And we continue to meet the most critical capital needs. A couple of my department heads would argue with that, but we're trying to meet the needs of the town and our departments, but we obviously can't fund every single item that is needed. Here's a list of the largest projects in town. Again, the annual paving. This will be this year $1,250,000 in cash. If we continue our progress on this, in 2 years, we will be paying 100% in cash. And if you remember, I think 5 years ago, we were paying only $450,000 in cash. And we've moved that up 100,000 every single year. We put in the library window and door replacement, Public Works tandem axle dump truck, fire department equipment reserves, town hall generator, and in the school, the boys' locker room. That's in here at $1,322,000. In talking to the MBC and members of the Board of Ed, they are reconsidering that and re-looking at that, where they believe they can bring that project down to a more reasonable level, and they're working on that now. The rear field at the Brookfield High School, it's at the point it needs to be replaced. And these are all things that were in the Tecton and in the 10-year plan of what we're doing. The Brookfield High School, replace the guiding wing wiring and air conditioning above it. And the exterior windows and door security film, I think that's a very worthwhile. And Wisconneer, we are going to hopefully replace the original electrical service, which was on the list last year. And Brookfield High School's plumbing fixtures and details. So if we look at our revenue driver, except for the 1 year where you see the dip, and that was a reval year, the grand list mill rates and tax analysis, and this is broken out, it may not be easy to see, but the blue is residential, obviously it's the largest thing, commercial, industrial, public utilities, vacant land, I can't read this last, use assessment. And these are the levels of what the growth has been in the grand list. And you can see it's averaged about 1% per year. If the Iroquois project goes live, which they still say it's going to, that's going to bring between $90 and $100 million in taxable property into town. And that would generate a significant increase in new taxes. We looked at the tax collection rate. The boards have been getting the reports all along from particularly due to the COVID and the pandemic. We're slightly down this year by about 0.2%. And while that's not always a perfect scenario, not the best scenario, it's better than we had originally imagined it would be. And we're going to use a 5-year average on the collection rate. And we think that's a reasonable thing to do. As we start to come out of the pandemic, we believe that the economy will continue to pick up. So other revenues, yes.
Sorry, can I just ask, is there any risk on that Iroquois revenue?
No, my guess would be, a lot of projects come in town. We have a couple in the Four Corners area that have been they have written approval for projects. Zoning has completely approved them. They could put a shovel in the dirt tomorrow, and it hasn't happened for 8 years. But with the Iroquois project, they specifically told us that they have contracts that they have to deliver on in New York, starting in 2023, that require them to install the extra capacity in their Brookfield site. They've already bought the properties across the street from their existing plant because they didn't want to have the problem of having houses that close to their plant. They proposed to us that they change the entrance to the property We are getting regular reports from them. They are still moving forward. Their current plan is to be up and running by the end of 2023. Now, if that happens, and they've told us it's a $90 to $100 million project, if it's a 90 million, let's say it's a $100 million project, that would generate $2.1 million in new tax revenue. If it's a $90 million project, it would generate about 1.8 million. Even if it's a $50 million project, it would generate about 900 and some odd thousand in additional revenue. They've told us that they are moving forward with this. So that's about as good as you can get. And we're getting reports both from FERC and from them that are showing their progress in moving forward on it. So they're still moving forward. Does that answer your question, Ricky?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, thank you. Resulting budget, and this is what we sent out to you guys today. Again, I apologize, you didn't get the whole thing last night. But again, the town operations and the Board of Selectmen is suggesting this budget would go up 1.6%. The schools would go up 2.98. The capital, again, for the reasons we discussed, not having last year and trying to catch up, would go up 54% to 2,000,003. And our overall, if you go to the bottom, our overall mill rate, taking into consideration, remember last year we cut land use fees, we cut tax, town clerk fees. Those have come up somewhat. The mill rate will go to 1.5, I'm sorry, I can't even see it. I got this in my way. 1.49%. And that would be the increase that residents would pay in their taxes. Their taxes would go up 1.49%. So that means for an average house, so let's say it's $350,000, your taxes would go up $108 next year. And that's the end of our presentation. Any questions, concerns, issues?
On the CLA, Steve, can you go back to them? Because then their presentation to us, we're spending that money for 30-year boats, not 15-year boats.
I could be wrong. Could be 30-year boats.
Why are they trying to recoup their whole reserve in 1 year?
Because they need, remember, they wanted 2 boats and they need another boat next year.
They bought the boat, so there's a $200,000 differential. So the 5 towns each pay $40,000. Their numbers are wrong in their presentation. So in their presentation, they say they're only going to take 30,000 in capital over the next 2 years, but in their budget, they put 40,000. So I don't even know if their numbers are solid in what they sent us or where they stand and why they're trying to recoup the reserve. Because if you take the 150,000 left for the boat, they got 100,000. If they bought 2 boats, they were going to buy for 300,000. They got 100,000 from the owner. That leaves a $200,000 balance. They used the 50,000 reserve, leaving a $150,000 balance. So that number that they sent us, they're recouping their whole capital reserve in 1 year.
Yeah.
And by the logic that you were using, if the boats do last 30 years, which I remember from the presentation, we should be paying only a few dollars a year to recoup back to their reserve, because then in 30 years, they'd be buying a new boat.
Well, I'll double check the numbers, but if they're 30-year boats, and you have a better memory for that than I do, then what they would be asking for after next year is 1/30 of the future cost of the boats, like we do with the fire trucks.
Right, but they included it all in this year. They included the 50,000 in this year. That's why we went from 85 to 130 something.
I don't have that right in front of me, but let me check that. I'll write it down and we'll vet it further.
And make sure that their presentation that they had done on January, their numbers don't match the presentation to their spreadsheets. They got errors in it.
Okay. Will do.
And then as another long term, the animal control went way up. Is there something you can find out about that? Because that's
actually, animal control is going down this year. It went way up last year because New Fairfield pulled out of regional animal control, and they did it right as we were doing the budgets. And so we couldn't make an adjustment. This year, it's down around $32,000. One
You sure
position
about
is
that? Because the line item in Marcia's budget, unless you took it out as a Board of Selectmen, I thought it went up.
no.
The Board of Select, it was an adjustment in the Board of Selectmen. At the time that Steve did his budget, they didn't have the final numbers. And they were still working on the numbers. So
Yeah.
we updated it on the Selectmen's budget to what the current numbers are. So there was a change in the Selectmen's budget,
So what did
Yeah.
it go down to?
about $101,000.
And what was it the prior year? 130 something?
132.
Okay.
Yeah. We're still looking at that. I'm talking to Newtown, and Westcog is doing a study on regional animal control. I think we don't have the right structure for regional animal control. And I think we need to look at the whole thing and say, how many people do we need? Where do we need them? How many calls do we get? We're gathering all that information. This is, I think, something that continues to need work. I don't know if we can actually save any money, but I want to make sure that what we're spending is spent properly with the regional animal control. And Curtis Reed runs that. It's considered, from a legal standpoint, part of the Bridgewater budget, in a sense. And he controls it, manages the people. And so we're down one staff this year, and we're looking at, does that make sense? Is that the right amount of staff? This year, we've had a drop in the number of calls. Makes sense. People are home with their pets. Pets aren't getting out. But we need to do more research on that.
Okay.
And we're working on that right now.
Then on the Board of Ed cut, what was the rationale behind the number that was picked? I think the ESSER grants were around 77,000 that they were going to recover, if I remember right, which
Yeah.
meant you took 63, the Board of Selectmen removed an extra 63,000. What was the rationale behind that?
Yeah, the summer school is 55. The technology is somewhere between 20 and 40,000. The Board of Selectmen talked about this for quite a long time. Our goal is, and I have to be honest, it wasn't a unanimous vote. It was 2 to cut and 1 to keep their budget as is. The 2 people that voted to cut it, and I was one of them, we need to have budgets that come out to our residents that are passable, that will pass in the first referendum. And we thought, if you take the ESSER money out, let's say that's $90,000, you're cutting $40,000 from their actual budget for next year.
Right,
And
but are you sure on those numbers? Because I pretty much recall like 77,000 as a total.
No, yeah, it was
It was
70,000.
55 for the schools and 12 for the software, if I remember right. I don't have it in front of me,
Yeah,
so
it was 55,560 for the summer school and 15,000 for the technology. And
Right.
talking to John and Ken, we had a meeting with them this week. That number can possibly go up. Still a little soft. They just got the final requirements this week, but we think that could go up about to 40,000 at a max. So that, if you make it 90, say it goes up 35, that leaves 40,000 that the Board of Selectmen cut. That is less than 0.1% of their entire budget. And it gets their budget under 3% increase, which I think both Harry and I thought was important. We have to, it's still in a pandemic. We still have people out of jobs. We still need to be very, very careful and responsible about how we spend money. And that is a very small cut in their budget. I think they did an excellent job on their budget. I think it was clear. It was transparent. I think most of the board members, at least the Board of Selectmen, agreed with that. I think the Board of Finance did too. So we're trying to achieve a budget that will work for everyone and have the lowest possible increase while not decreasing the core services and the additional services they want to give their students. You know, they have 1.07% of their budget is for new special, investments in their system, which I support. So we did not think that 0.1% would be in any way crippling to the schools in what they're trying to do. But getting
Glenn?
under 3% is psychologically, people in this day and age, it's a tough time.
Glenn, if I could speak to that, I am the dissenting vote on that. I felt that we should keep the Board of Education budget as they had requested it. My concern, and I've seen lots of articles on this since then, is that we don't really know what our kids are going to be facing. They're expecting that reading is going to be behind 6 months, math is going to be behind 12 months when the kids go back to school. I think we're doing a disservice to take any money out of the budget, and I think we should be prepared to supply them with any other extra funds that they'll need next year. Summer school is nice, but I think we're going to need a lot of aides, a lot of tutors. I think our children are going to need a lot of help, and that's why I voted to keep the money in.
Yeah, Sue, I agree with you that it's quite possible we're going to have some significant needs to get our students back up to speed. But if they need that money, the Board of Finance and the town has always been willing to fund things that they absolutely need. And I would suggest that we would be open to any requests that they have going through the school year. We've done it with special ed, we've done it with other things, and the town has always stepped up as an entity to support the schools when they show the real need.
So I actually would echo your points. I'm sort of on board with you as personally as one member of the Board of Finance. I'd like to find the money on the town side and move it over to the schools. So I find a way to manage this somehow. I think the school came in at a very reasonable ask in a pandemic. I think they did their homework. I think they gave us the data behind their rationale. As a quick, like out of the gates statement, I would echo with you. How's that?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Glenn, if we could do that, I'd be fine with moving 30,000 or 40,000 from the town side over there. Well, let's go through it. We'll go through it in the next 2 weeks.
So I think those are the only long lead questions that I had. Anybody else got long leads so the Board of Selectmen can prepare for our deliberations?
I have two.
Go ahead.
So the first one has to do with the contingency, which is a very, very specific number. And I'm curious how that relates to the fund balance plan and policies that were presented to us a couple of meetings ago, which had impact on contingency. So can you talk about how that was constructed, and then also about just the fund balance policy in general and how that reverberates through this budget proposal?
The contingency was set at 0.5% of the overall budget. I've always been a believer that we need some contingency, and because you never know what's going to happen. And history has proven over the last couple of years that we have used our contingency and used it well. And the second thing is we're still trying to grow our fund balance. So anything that we don't use in that contingency can go towards that fund balance. Dan, you're aware of this. No matter, even if we stay even with the amount of our fund balance, it still has to grow every year because the budget does grow somewhat. So to keep it at 10%, if the budget goes up 1%, the fund balance has to go up 1%. So we thought that that was a reasonable amount to put aside for contingency.
So I'm trying to remember the fund balance policy. Wasn't there supposed to be an additional contingency specifically contemplated to go to increasing the fund balance, or am I incorrect in that it was just any surplus?
No, that was a discussion point. Remember, we haven't finished up that policy. Remember that we were going back and forth, and then pandemic hit us. There was conversation about that. We would like, my personal opinion is, we would like to get the fund balance up above 15%, so that, God forbid, we did have to take a hit, we won't get hit by the rating agencies because we have enough balance there to do it. And we do need to finish up that policy. But that was in there, Dan, that was.
Okay.
We didn't put anything in this year because of the pandemic, and we're trying to keep our increase as low as possible.
Yep.
And Dan, to your point that we did have in there for a contingency in the expenditure part, and we did have it at 0.5%, which is a decision point if we wanted to do 0.5% or anything else that hasn't been voted on or anything yet.
Yep.
The second one that I think that you're thinking of is if we were to have a surplus, that we would say $1 million surplus, that we would say 500,000 we're not going to spend, and 500,000 we're going to assign for large needs that we could touch if we really had to.
Okay.
I think that's what you're thinking.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. And then my other question has to do with capital, and I have to admit, I'm confused, and probably because I don't understand exactly what happened last year with regard to what we ended up. We didn't bond anything. So are we kind of doing a 2-year borrowing in this budget? Is that what we're doing?
Kind of, not exactly. If you look at your budget, the green highlighted items in the capital are the
Yeah.
ones that were in last year's budget. It's not a perfect 1-to-1, but it's pretty close. Marcia, you agree it's pretty close? I haven't.
Steve, do you want, since you still have it on your screen, do you want to go up to where we compare it to
Yeah.
the that
Yeah,
little
there
next
we
green
go.
one? So on the bonded, what we did on the bottom, the proposed budget's got 5.2 million. We didn't do any bonded last year. And again, comparing it to the model that didn't have a pandemic in it, that
Predict a pandemic? Come on.
that when we compare it to the model, last year we were trying to reduce the bonding every year. Last year, the model said we spend 3.2 million. That's on that bottom line there. And the current year, for the 2022 year, we would spend 2.3 million. So the 10-year model number of 5,587,000 are those 2 years combined, and the proposed budget is the 2 years combined.
Okay, when we're gonna, we'll go through this, but that needs to be really crisp when we understand it and when we present it to the town, because that number jumps out. But when you
Does jump out.
you have to, so we're gonna have to explain that really, really well. Okay, that's all I had, Glenn.
All right, Ricky, you want to talk about your thing on capital so we can move forward on that and give them time?
Yeah, looking at the electric vehicles and stations. So just to be clear, it's 4 vehicles and charging stations for $50,000.
Correct.
And the vehicle.
Hold on, Ricky. Hold on, Ricky. Was it 5 in the presentation to us originally?
No,
We talked about 4 or 5. We're looking at 4 right now. That makes the most sense. So it's a maximum of 50,000, Rick.
Go ahead, Ricky. So finish off. I'm sorry.
right. The 4 vehicles that are being retired, can we repurpose any of them for, are any of them gonna be useful for any, let's say, maintenance vehicles? And I believe that we had a Ford Transit with very low mileage on it that could potentially be used to cart some tools or anything around.
No,
Can that be repurposed for anything else?
if we do this, those have to come off the road. They have to be removed. It's a 1-for-1 swap. We're working right now on some financials for you, so you can see the cost of a vehicle, the cost to replace it, what the electrical vehicle costs, what the maintenance costs are. New York City has, we're doing some research on them. New York City has 1,200 electrical vehicles in their fleet, and they've done some pretty significant studies and analysis. And so when we get to that point, I haven't finished that because I just got that. So if we can discuss that, but overall, electric vehicles, especially, remember, this is both for charging stations and for the vehicles. So for a $40,000 vehicle, we would pay $8,000 for the vehicle is our current plan, right? 20%. We would pay 20% of the charging stations too.
All right, and now, and one of the vehicles was a police detective vehicle, correct?
Right. So what we would most likely do there in talking to the chief, this is almost a little experimental for the police. So the chief of police might use that vehicle because he doesn't have as much need. He's a manager, and we would
Okay.
use that. Or they may come to us, maybe use a private duty. They haven't told us. They have a number of things, and they would like to try to use it.
Okay, then you have 2 fleet vehicle replacements as well. So this one is not, this electric police cruiser is not going to be used for the typical police
No,
work. So it's not like we can
no.
swap out one of those fleet vehicle replacements.
Right. In the
Okay.
normal budget each year, the police come and ask, their standard is to replace cars every 3 to 4 years and ask for 3 cars each year. They believe they only need 2 cars this year and they can put 1 off for next year. But this is a separate program. The electric vehicles is pretty much, you got to look at separately from the police budget.
Do we have that slide that we could throw up, Steve? Because I can't pull it up on my phone.
I don't have it completed and I don't want to give you incomplete information. So if we can do that and it'll be ready for when we discuss the capital, I don't want to give you bad information. I want to give you complete information. You can look at it.
Okay. Anything else, Ricky?
No, all my other capital questions, they ended up cutting all that stuff anyway in the Board of Selectmen.
I haven't had a chance to review, but where do we stand on the paving? Because we didn't do the paving capital this year. Ralph said at one of your meetings, he could remove quite a bit of money, but he needed some money now. You made a statement that if the budget got voted down, we can't do it. Where do we stand? Because it was like $500,000.
Yeah. So I don't have the number right in front of me, but after this long-term discussions with Ralph, because of this budget won't get approved till May, he is very comfortable with the $1.5 million for next year's budget to pave the roads. And I believe it was 615. Marcia, do you remember the number that we were taking out? I don't have it in front of me.
It was 550, I believe.
550. That we
And
would
that's
not
removed
spend.
in your new budget?
Yeah. Yeah.
Anybody else? Mark, you have anything?
No, I need more time to review all this.
Okay.
So.
Brianna?
I just wanted to review everything. Thank you so much. And thank you for making the binder for me. I appreciate
welcome.
it.
You're welcome. It's pretty big, isn't it?
It is, but I like writing on it.
No, that's okay.
Eileen, you have anything you want to add?
Just a question about the ECS grant. I wasn't expecting to see it go up. Is that a confirmed number, the 962,000?
That's the number that the governor proposed. All of those numbers are what the governor proposed. So that's the best number we have. I don't think ECS is going to go down at all, especially given a pandemic year. A lot of school systems are really hurting. So I don't see that going down. I can't guarantee it, but I don't see that going down.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we know the risk if it does.
And Eileen, that is equal to what we had this year. That, but when we passed the budget, the state hadn't finalized their numbers yet, so they did restore it in last year's budget. So it hasn't jumped. It's just when we compare it to last year's budget with the information we had at the time, it looks like it jumped, but actual to next year's budget did not jump.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, otherwise I need to. I'm a little
And
behind.
the ECS is
So I have more
directly,
review to do.
the ECS is directly correlated with kind of like the paid school lunches, isn't it? Like anybody who has to have sort of on the lunch assistance program, isn't that directly kind of the number?
Yeah, the SNAP benefits are part of the formula. It's average per capita income, grand list value. They have a whole bunch of things that they take into consideration. And somebody in the basement up in the legislature actually crunches these numbers. And also within the ECS are a number of carve outs for certain communities that they get more money. I don't think ECS treats us fairly. We're similar to Bethel. We have about a $3,000 per family higher income. They do have more kids on SNAP benefits, but their budget's very similar to ours. The community is very similar to ours. Number of residents is similar to ours. But Bethel gets almost $9 million in ECS,
Yeah.
and we get 962,000. So you can argue whether it's fair or not. But in a way, that was a plus 2 years ago. Remember when Malloy wanted to cut out all grants? And we had to make up a situation of having to levy an additional tax. There's no way they could find 10% of their budget, more than 10% of their budget, just for that ECS. And I think overall, all the grants are well above 9 million. I don't know the exact number.
For another long term, can we go back up to the Capitol?
Yeah.
The slide, so I could see that, please.
Oh, yeah, let me go there. I was actually in the Excel spreadsheets. Oops, sorry, wrong way. Okay, I pull up. Where am I? I'm looking for it. For me, this is pretty small too. Against the 10-year plan, is that what you want?
No, the layout of the projects. You had them laid out, like the town side and the school side. You had a quick little summary in your presentation. So this is what you discussed and we went through. I think as a board, we're all struggling with the boys' locker room renovation. I mean, is that clear now with the Board of Selectmen? Because you left it in the budget. So
we left it in the budget with the understanding. I had a discussion with Paul Checo from the MPC that he would be able to get this down a good bit. He said he would come back to us when he had a number that he thought was more reliable. I think he agreed with the Board of Finance when we discussed this last year that it needed to be reworked and rethought. Remember, the opposing team would be walking directly through our locker room. There were a couple things, and I think Mark Mulvaney had some concerns that were very legitimate, I think. So he said he would be coming back to us with a better idea and a better plan of what that number would be.
In what time frame?
It's this urgent. We're going to lose accreditation over it and da-da-da. And they haven't done a thing with it in a year. They haven't changed the number. They haven't looked into a thing. I volunteered to tackle a couple of these crushing issues for free with my licensed and insured team, and heard crickets back. How critical are these things? A year, we're dealing with the same number.
Yeah.
I'm tired of it.
To their defense, though, it's not like they haven't been busy with the new school. But you raise a good point.
So when is Paul going to get back to us with these numbers, since we have, 3 weeks to get this done?
I will confirm with him tomorrow.
Because that's a big number on that page.
It's a very big number.
Glenn, this is Harry. I know I'm not a part of this conversation. Can I make
You're part of the Board of Selectmen. It's your meeting.
Okay. Oh, that's right.
It's our meeting too.
I forgot. A couple quick things. The wording in here is a bit deceiving for other people who just look at this because they're thinking that the $1.3 million is for renovating the locker room. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but this also, I believe, includes outdoor facilities for bathrooms. So it's more than just the locker room. As far as accreditation goes, I find it hard to believe, and I doubt seriously whether this is going to cost them their accreditation. I think that is kind of a trump card that gets thrown out there, but I doubt seriously.
Harry, it's what they presented it as last year.
Oh, exactly. I agree with you, Mark. I agree with you. And then the other thing with the ECS money, one of the things with the ECS money is I spoke with David Scribner. David Scribner, a long time ago, probably 10 years ago, looked into this, as well as Steve Hardy. The ECS wordage, it's about a 3,000 page document that is so confusing that these numbers that they're giving us to go back and justify them is almost impossible. And we have always been behind the 8 ball with getting our money, and they have not been able to do anything about it, both state representatives.
Yeah,
So.
true. It's a mess. So I will call Pacheco in the morning, get an update, because you're right, that number. Harry, I thought, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, that it included access for the public from the outside to bathrooms, not outside not separate buildings.
Correct.
Yeah, agreed.
Correct.
Here's a dumb question. Well,
But-
if they know, and if they're going to have a new number based off of no redesign, do they still need a 35,000 for the redesign?
I
Like,
think
how are they
so.
going to come up with a decent estimate without the redesign is my question.
Well, remember, Tecton has done, and I'm getting into a little gray area here, but Tecton has done a lot of work on this already. And I think, if I remember correctly, they were going to use Tecton to do the redesign, and it wouldn't be as expensive as starting from scratch. And if I remember correctly, also from last year, I think they said that Tecton could do that in a reasonable amount of time.
No,
So,
that's fine, but I totally agree with funding the redesign, but how do you come up with an updated number from the 1.3 million for the renovation without the redesign?
Paul told me that they were looking at a number of ideas, and I don't want to speak for him. So let me get what he's got before I give you bad information.
Yeah, I'd hate for it
Good
to
question, Rick.
be, hey, we could do it for 900,000, and then
Right.
1.1, and then we got to go back for more.
So Steve, so I understand clearly, this 1.322 million is a placeholder put in there by the Board of Selectmen to get a better number, but you haven't endorsed the number yet,
Not yet, no,
or the project.
no. If it came down to the end of it and we're here and the Board of Finance needs to make a decision and we don't have better numbers, we would have to do something with this, either take it out or cut it substantially, in my opinion. I'm not comfortable putting up a number of 1.3 million, nor do I think you are, Glenn, if it's not a good number.
Right, but here's my issue from the whole point of it is we sat this number last year. We talked about this number last year. It's sort of like what Mark said, and now it got passed by the Board of Selectmen as a placeholder regardless, but now it's put on the Board of Finance. Because now, once you approve this, it's up to us 6 members to say yay or nay on this process. And it's really not at a process that it should have come to us yet at this stage. It's not quite there yet, Steve. It really isn't. And you guys approved it in this budget. And now it's up to the 6 of us to be the decision makers on the next step.
You make a fair point, Glenn. That was not our intent to put the Board of Finance on the spot. Our intent was to make sure that this gets a clear and fair hearing. And if we turned it down, then you guys can't even look at it.
Right,
Right.
but I'm saying the
No,
budget
it's not
process.
We
true.
could add things
You
in.
could change- No, you could change items. I'm sorry,
Absolutely, we
that's
could.
correct. You could change or add. So we're not trying to put you guys on the spot, but it is a placeholder here that this has been up and discussed for many years. And we need either move on it or take it down.
I think the thing is, we all agree that some move has to be made. But yet now we get to the budget process, and that's when the move is being put on us, when we could have maybe been talking about this 6 months ago and had this to a number that was 700,000. So when it gets to a budget process and it gets to a Board of Selectmen approval
Yeah.
process, you guys are approving a harder number, which gives us a better number.
Yeah. Well, I'll push those guys, both the NBC and the schools, to come up with a number for us. And we'll move forward from there. It wasn't our intent to just throw this in your lap and have you be the ones making the decision. That wasn't our intent at all.
All right, anybody else got anything to add?
I've got one other question on capital. Last year, Steve, you'd mentioned the potential for Iroquois to cover some of the costs of the baseball field irrigation and or the drainage issues.
Yep.
But I see that's back as a capital item. Whatever happened with that?
The Iroquois is still willing to support us, but they are not going to support us. And they were pretty clear on this. They'll support us on a number of projects, but I think we could get something bigger out of Iroquois.
Okay.
Something much bigger than that. And we're discussing that now and what we should approach them with.
Okay.
Now, when
Perhaps
you
a new
say,
boys locker room.
I'm sorry?
Perhaps a new boys locker room.
Yeah, perhaps a newsboys locker room or Harry's sportsplex that he wants. That he
so now when you say
Well-
the Iroquois revenue, Steve, coming on board, you said that earlier, like years down the road.
Yeah.
Is that the tax revenue or is that
Yeah.
something you work out as agreement or is that a hardcore
No,
fact?
Great tax revenue. But Iroquois is very, very, and has shown in the past, very willing to support towns that they work in and significantly. The last time they built with us, I don't know who passed this, but Iroquois is exempt from paying building permit fees. But the last time they came into town, they paid the building permit fee. If they did that this time, that would be $900,000 on a $90 million project about. So I think that we can work with them and possibly get more. They've already agreed they will give us some of the property at the back of Wisconsin if we need it when we work on the baseball fields. So it's still a work in progress, but they're still committed to 2023. So the latest we would see that revenue would be half of 2023 and 2024.
And potentially see building fees earlier than
Potentially, yeah.
2022.
You know, they might make a contribution to town in lieu of building permit fees.
Right.
We're certainly going to ask.
Ricky, you want to make a closing statement from our side?
Wasn't planning on it now.
Eileen, you good?
I'm good.
Dan,
Yep.
Mark,
I'm still good. I need to review.
Brianna,
All good.
Sue, you want to say anything to the Board of Finance?
I said my piece. I'm good. Thank you.
Harry,
I don't really have much to say. I can say that I have full confidence that what you're going to do is going to be for the benefit of the town, regardless of whether the budget goes up or goes down. So I have full confidence in this.
thank you. Steve, you want to add?
Yeah, I'm good. Just thank you guys for, you know, doing all this hard work. You know, in my letter to the town that and to the boards, you know, I pointed out last year that the Board of Finance has done an incredible job in last year's budget, in my opinion. Just an incredible job, an incredibly difficult year in order to get a budget that works, but is as low as possible. So ahead of time, I thank you for all the good work you guys do.
Thank you.
Glenn, one quick thing that I will say that one of my goals was this year was to not put the full weight on the Board of Finance. My goal was to cautiously and respectfully make reductions in the budget that I felt would not, cripple any department or part of our programs to give you a head start. So that was one of my goals, and I think one of our goals is so I'm not going to speak for the whole slide, but I think I can say that, we tried to get the ball rolling for you.
I will add to that. I think y'all did. I think you did some work on the front end. Also, the Board of Ed, I know they're not here, but I think they really came through this year with a realistic ask, whether we agree to it, not agree to it, work around it. The work was done. Their backup data was much better than last year. it really went well. And then you guys did trim out in your last few meetings and had some hard decisions to make and made them as well. So I think that process worked this year. How's that?
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Steve, are you closing it?
Do we have public comment at the end?
Yes.
We do. Any public comment? Does anybody wish to make a statement? Do we have anybody on, Jenny, that you can see? We don't see anybody on there. Going once.
Huh, interesting.
No public, yeah.
Probably on YouTube.
Okay, so not hearing any public comment, I will entertain a
Much later.
motion to adjourn the Board of Selectmen meeting.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the selectmen meeting.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have a motion to adjourn the Board of Finance meeting.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn the Board of Finance meeting.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Bye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, everyone.